got it here. We'll start one more time, please. Om Asya Shri Lalita Divya Sahasranama Stotra Mahamantrasya
Om Asya Shri Lalita Sahasranama Stotra Mahamantrasya
Vashinyadi Vagdevata Rishayah
Vashinyadi Vagdevata Rushanyaha
Anushtup Chandaha
Anushtup Chandaha
Sri Lalita Para Bhattarika Mahatripura Sundari Devata.
Sorry, I don't think I have that wording in my booklet.
Okay.
Same here, yeah. And that's right what she's saying too. That wording is not there.
Okay,
Even
the one that I provided?
yeah, whatever you provided, that's the one which doesn't have this.
Okay, so why don't I just open the one that I provided? There are so many variations depending on which book you're reading from, so we'll do that. Sorry. Just opening that document now.
Whatever you send it to us.
Yeah, perfect. So we'll just do this one now then. We'll start from the starting. Om Asya Shri Lalita Sahasranama Stotra Mahamantrasya
Om Asya Shri Lalita Sahasranama Stotra Mahamantrasya
Vashinyadi Vagdevata Rishayah
Vashinyadi Vagdevata Rushayaha
Anushtup Chandaha
Anushtup Chandaha
Sri Lalita Parameshwari Devata
Shri Lalita Parameshwari Devata
Srimad Vag. Okay, here we will change it. I'm I'm Bijam
I am Bijam
Kleem Shaktihi
Kleem Shaktihi
Sauhkilakam
Saukilakam
Sri Lalita Mahatripura Sundari Prasada Siddhyarthe
Shri Lalita Mahatripura Sundari sorry, what was the last?
Prasada Siddhyarthe
Prasada Siddhyarte
Jape Viniyogaha.
Jape Viniyogaha.
Now we will do the Karanyasam first. Aim Angushtabhyam Namaha
Aim Angushtam Bhyam Namaha
Sauhu Anamikabhyam Namaha
Sauhu Anamika Bhyam Namaha
Kleem Tarjanibhyam Namaha
Kleem Tarjani Bhyam Namaha
Kleem Kanishtikabhyam Namaha
Kleem Kanishtika Bhyam Namaha
Sauhu Madhyamabhyam Namaha.
Sauhu Madhyamam Bhyam Namaha.
Sorry, 1 second, there is a mistake in this book too. Aim Karatalakaraprishtabhyam Namaha
Aim Karatala Karaprishtabhyam Namaha
Aim Hridayaya Namaha
Aim Hridayaya Namaha
Kleem Shirase Swaha.
Kleem Shirase Swaha.
Sorry. We'll do it one more time, please. Aim Hridayaya Namaha
Aim Hridayaya Namaha
Sauhu Shirase Sauhu Kava. Sorry, I'm looking at a book that is completely wrong, so that's why I don't want to do this. I'll just do it. Aim Hridayaya Namaha
Aim Hridayaya Namaha
Sauhu Shirase Swaha
Sau Sirashe Swaha
Kleem Shikhayai Vashat
Kleem Shikhaye Vashit
Kleem Kavachaya Hum
Kleem Kavachaya Bhum
Sauhu Netratrayaya Vaushat
Sau Netratrayaya Vaushat
Aim Astraya Phat
Aim Astraya Phat
Bhurbhuvassuvaromiti Digbandaha.
Could you please repeat it again?
Bhurbhuvassuvaha
Bhurbhuva Swaha
Om iti Digbandaha.
Om Iti Digbandaha.
Yeah, so when I'm writing it in the document, that would be the final version. Looks like the version that I have here in front of me, which is supposed to be Gita Press book, but there are mistakes here. So I personally will just write in that document with the correct version, and that's what you can practice, please. So we'll do one Dhyana Slokam, and then we'll do the Panchopacharam, and then we'll do the Lalitopakhyanam. Okay. Sinduraruna Vigraham
Sindurarunavigraham
Trinayanam
Trinayanam
Manikya Maulispurat
Manikya
Taranayaka Shekharam
Taranayakashekharam
Smitamukhim
Smitamukhim
Api Navakshoruham
Api Navakshoruham
Panibhyamalipurnaratna
Panibhyam Alipurnaratna
Chashakam
Chashakam
Raktotpalam Bibhratim
Raktotpalam Bhibratim
Saumyam Ratnagatasta
Saumyam Ratnagatasta
Raktacharanam
Raktacharanam
Dhyayet Paramambikam.
Dhyayet Paramambik Dhyayet Parama. Sorry, could you please repeat it?
Yeah, sure. Dhyayet Param Ambikam is the three words. So Dhyayet Param Ambikam.
Dhyayet Param Ambikam.
Awesome. So we'll do the Panchopacharam now. Here, the difference is if you were on the Vishnu Sahasranamam class, we were saying Lam Pritivyatmane. Here, we are praying to the Supreme in the feminine form. So what we will say will change because of the gender. So we will say Lam Pritivyatmikayai, which is the feminine. Pritivyatmane is the masculine. Lam Pritivyatmikayai. Prithivi Atmikaya, basically two words. So we'll have to combine them together to say Lam Prithivyatmikayai
Lam Prativyamikaye
Gandham Kalpayami
Gandham Kalpayami
Ham Akashatmikayai
Ham Akashatmikaye
Pushpam Kalpayami
Pushpam Kalpayami
Yam Vayavyatmikayai
Yam Vyayet Vyatmikaye
Dhupam Kalpayami
Dhupam Kalpayami
Ram Agniyatmikayai
Ram Agniyatmikaye
Deepam Kalpayami
Deepam Kalpayami
Vam Amrutatmikayai
Vam Amritatmikaye
Amrutam Kalpayami
Amrutam Kalpayami
Sam Sarvatmikayai
Sam Sarvatmikaye
Samastopacharan
Samastopicharan
Kalpayami.
Kalpayami.
Okay, so now we are ready to do the actual chant, but before we go into the chant, we'll do the Lalitopakhyanam. And I will post proper document for this. Apologies. I realized I did not start with the Shuklam Bhardaram, which is my sentiment. So, note to self. Okay, are we ready for the story? So in this one, I'm just reading the story from a book. And this Lalitopakhyanam is again based on the Saubhagya Bhaskaram by Bhaskara Raya and from Brahmanda Puranam. So in this one, there is no change, no commentary or anything like that. It's just a description of what happened and why did Lalita Sahasranamam came into chanting before, what happened before that. Okay. The story of Lalitopakhyana begins with sage Agastya and the mountain range in central India known as Vindhya. In Puranic stories, inanimate objects such as mountains also have personalities. Being the tallest mountain range in the region, Vindhya is overcome with pride, wanting to show off his might, and without care or consideration for the forests and the life he supports, he begins to grow at an abnormally fast pace. Agastya is a revered sage of extremely high attainments, and Lord Shiva entrusts him with the task of stopping Vindhya from causing large scale destruction. Agastya sets off, making his way south from his home in the north. When he reaches Vindhya, he requests the mountain to temporarily stop growing and allow him safe passage. Vindhya grants his request, vowing that he wouldn't resume his growth until the sage made his way back north. Agastya decides to remain in the south, making Vindhya wait for his return indefinitely. He continues his journey south, visiting various sacred sites and is assessing the pulse of human condition along the way. Agastya is saddened and disillusioned to see the descent of humanity into hedonism at the cost of liberation and harmony. He finally arrives at Kanchipuram, where Lalita Devi resides as Kamakshi. Here, he settles down to take up severe austerities to please Lord Vishnu, who eventually appears as Hayagriva. And Hayagriva is the equivalent of Vishnu of Dakshinamurti of Shiva. He is the Lord of knowledge. And pleased with Agastya's devotion, is prepared to grant him anything. The exceedingly compassionate Agastya asks the Lord for an easy path to freedom on behalf of all humankind. Lord Hayagriva declares that chanting the 1,000 names of Lalita Devi with devotion can fulfill all desires and grant liberation. Interest piqued, Agastya is filled with curiosity and begs to know more. However, Lord Hayagriva directs him to a sage, confusingly of the name Hayagriva, so there are two Hayagrivas here, for further instruction and disappears into thin air. Agastya goes on to find sage Hayagriva, who imparts the knowledge of the Lalita Sahasranamam through the story of Lalita Devi. So the next part of this is Vanity of Indra. Once Indra, the lord of the Devas, wins a war against the Asuras and is consumed with conceit. Sage Durvasa, who like Agastya is a sage of supreme attainment, is called upon to teach Indra a lesson and quell his arrogance. As he is traveling to Indra's abode, he comes across a woman with a garland of fragrant, ever fresh flowers. She happily gives it to him. Durvasa is ecstatic to be in possession of the auspicious garland. He blesses her profusely and continues on his travels. Meanwhile, Indra sets out on his elephant to tour his kingdom and runs into the sage. Durvasa generously offers him the auspicious garland. The conceited Indra carelessly tosses it on the elephant's head, irritating the beast. The elephant throws down the garland and tramples it, infuriating Durvasa, who promptly curses Indra with deprivation of all auspiciousness from his life and kingdom. The curse comes into effect immediately, and Indra's kingdom suddenly loses all its luster. The now repentant Indra turns to his guru Brihaspati for advice on how he could restore the luster to his dull kingdom. Brihaspati gives him a long-winded explanation of how many types of transgressions and their cause and effect phenomena, illustrating them with stories. So this is part of the previous Brahmanda Puranam. So one such story is Devi's victory over Bhandasura. Sage Hayagriva, the narrator of this story, tries to move on after this cursory introduction, but Agastya is intrigued. He interrupts him with questions. Wait a minute, who is Bhandasura? Why and how is Devi invoked? Please tell me all the details and please don't skip any parts of it. Hayagriva complies and goes on to narrate the story that is the central to the Lalita Sahasranama. So this is the pre-context to the pre-context. Now we are going into the real context. The rise of Bhandasura. In mythology, Brahma, Vishnu and Shiva are known as the Great Trinity, responsible for creating, sustaining and destroying the universe. Among them, Shiva is an ascetic, preferring to live in seclusion. At one point, he neglects his cosmic duties and becomes so absorbed in meditation that it results in a great imbalance, since life can't be sustained without death. Brahma and Vishnu invoke the great Shakti to help stir Shiva from his deep meditation. Shakti takes birth as Sati and the immaculate daughter of Daksha and falls in love with the meditating Shiva. Her irresistible beauty rouses Shiva from his reverie, and in spite of Daksha's strong dissent, Sati marries Shiva, transforming him from a detached yogi to a loving husband. Soon after the wedding, Daksha performs a grand fire ritual and invites luminaries from all the worlds except for his daughter and son-in-law. Assuming the lack of an invitation from her father to be an oversight and against Shiva's advice, Sati arrives at the ceremony. Instead of welcoming her, Daksha humiliates her publicly for marrying Shiva, the rogue yogi. Overcome with sadness, Sati steps into the ritual fire and immolates herself. When Shiva hears the news, he is beside himself with rage and grief, and his enraged army descends upon Daksha's palace, destroying it and decapitating him. Um, and he is later revived by Shiva's compassion. In deep mourning, Shiva wanders the universe with Sati's body flung over his shoulder. Once again, his cosmic power is withdrawn and creation is stalled. Determined to help, Vishnu follows him, consoling him while simultaneously slicing away parts of Sati's body to lighten Shiva's burden. A sacred Shakti Pitha arises wherever Sati's flesh drops on earth. Relieved of his physical burden and acute grief, Shiva returns to his life of solitude and withdrawal. The already out of balance creation becomes even more chaotic. As it happens, this chaotic state becomes the perfect milieu for the escalation of evil. A powerful asura known as Tarakasura rises to power. Invoking Brahma through severe austerities, he cunningly asks to be killed only by a son of Shiva, with full knowledge about his steadfast celibacy. With Shiva being uninterested in procreation, Tarakasura becomes invincible and spreads utter disharmony throughout the universe. To draw Shiva out of this reverie and to restore balance to the universe, Shakti takes birth again as Parvati, the exquisitely beautiful daughter of Himavat, who personifies the Himalaya mountains. Parvati stumbles upon the meditating Shiva on one of her walks in the mountains and falls in love with him. However, Shiva remains unmoved by her advances, and Vishnu and the others charge Kama or Manmadha with the task of stirring his desire. Kama, who operates through a sugarcane bow and arrows made of flowers, representing the mind and the senses, arrives at the scene with his wife Rati and playfully shoots an arrow of desire at Shiva. The arrow finds its mark, and Shiva opens his eyes to see the beautiful Parvati standing before him. Even as he is overcome with desire for her, he turns around looking for the source of this disturbance. Spotting Kama, he incinerates him with one angry glance. With Kama's death, the very desire for creation to continue comes to a total standstill, while Rati is torn apart in grief at the loss of her husband. Parvati eventually wins over Shiva and marries him. A son is born to them, known as Skanda, who destroys Tarakasura. When peace is finally restored, Chitrakarma, one of Shiva's commanders, gathers Kama's ashes and sculpts the pile into the form of a boy. Shiva affectionately glances at the form, and the ash boy springs to life. Chitrakarma cares for the boy and initiates him into a powerful Shiva mantra. The boy practices austerities with great intensity that Shiva is pleased with him and prepares to grant him a boon. The boy says, "May my opponents in battle lose half their strength merely by my presence, and may their strength be added to my own. May I be invincible and impervious to my opponent's weapons." Shiva is amused and grants him not only these unusual boons, but generously bestows upon him invincibility and sovereignty over the universe for 60,000 years. Hearing this, the all-knowing Brahma shakes his head, muttering, "Bhanda, Bhanda." The boy becomes known as Bhandasura. Becoming all-powerful through Shiva's boons, Bhandasura creates two brothers, Vishanga and Visukra, out of his own body. They set out on a rampage, destroying everything in their way and usurping the Devas from their stations. The Devas hold a meeting and decide that the best course of action would be to restore Kama, the primary force of creation, and Bhandasura's original form. Bhandasura gets wind of this plan and decides to render all the Devas impotent by drying up their rasa. Bhandasura and his army assume the form of wind and enter the minds of the Devas, depleting them of their mental faculties and robbing them of their beauty, luster, and even the will to live. In short, they rob them of auspiciousness. The desperate Devas decide to invoke Lalita Devi as a last resort measure. They perform austerities for 10,000 years, creating an enormous fire pit, offering up flesh cut from their own bodies. When Devi doesn't appear, they begin jumping into the fire, sacrificing themselves in desperate abandon. Devi's conquest of Bhandasura. At this point in the story, an immense Sri Chakra arises from the one that's here behind me, arises from the great sacrificial fire. The astounded Devas watch as this Chakra Raja Ratha grows out of the pit that had consumed so many of their comrades. Ratha is chariot, Chakra Raja is the king of chakras. It simultaneously emits the brilliance of a million suns and the cooling effect of a million moons. Seated in the center of the Sri Chakra is Devi herself, her brilliance surpassing that of the Sri Chakra. Mesmerizingly beautiful, with the complexion of a red hibiscus flower, she is adorned with the rarest gems and personifies the Srinagara rasa of beauty and desire. Her eyes emit unceasing love, grace, and playfulness. She has 4 arms in which she holds a noose, a hook, a sugarcane bow, and 5 arrows made of flowers. The whole universe stops to take in Devi's splendor and to drink in her magnificence. When Brahma and the others hear that the creator of the universe has taken form, they rush to witness this grand event. With one glance, Devi restores the Devas to their original state of beauty and radiance and marries Kameshwara in a lavish ceremony. She takes her place on the throne of Srinagara, her capital, in the midst of a mystical ocean of nectar. Celestial beings of every realm pay homage to Devi as Rajarajeshwari, the supreme empress of creation. Devi then sets out to deal with Bhandasura in an elaborate battle formation, accompanied by countless Shaktis, each one commanding her own group of forces. The war is a bloody one, and the Shaktis defeat Bhandasura's generals, brothers, and sons. We will see details of the war in part 2 on the context of Lalita Sahasranamam. Surrounded by her Shaktis, Devi storms Bhandasura's capital known as Sunyaka. His remaining army is overpowered and annihilated. Devi destroys him before restoring him to his original form as Kama, much to Rati's delight. The ever grateful Kama becomes eternally associated with Devi as her arrows of desire. With the resurrection of desire, creation finally returns to balance. Devi returns to Srinagara with her Shaktis to rule over the universe with her beloved Kameshwara. Agastya is deeply moved by the story. Sage Hayagriva stops talking and silence descends upon them. Agastya recalls that Lord Hayagriva had lauded the collection of the 1,000 names of Devi as the key to liberation. The sage had not revealed the 1,000 names yet, and Agastya wonders why. So again, after a bit of requesting, now Sage Agastya is giving the Lalita Sahasranamam to, Sage Hayagriva is giving Lalita Sahasranamam to Sage Agastya. So that's the context of Lalita Sahasranamam. We have to understand that each Sahasranamam has its own unique namas, though they all try to point to the same Advaita philosophy, but there is a bit of difference in one Sahasranamam and the other Sahasranamam. Few things with the Lalita Sahasranamam. In Vishnu Sahasranamam, about 70% of the namas, my calculation, 70% of the namas are very much about the Nirguna Brahman, and there are about 30% that describes the Bhagavan in his form. So Nirguna Brahman, as most of us know, Sagunam is somebody who has a form, a physical form, has eyes and hands, and we give a human shape and form to the Bhagavan. So that is Sagunam, and Nirgunam is God can be limited to one space or one, he's sitting on this throne or he's sleeping on the Ananta Shayya, etc. So the Nirguna Brahman is somebody who is the cosmic universal self. He is everywhere. So he doesn't have a shape or a form or attributes or characteristics. So you will see 70% of the namas in Vishnu Sahasranamam to be Nirguna Brahman. Like for example, Putatma, Vishwam, Vishnuhu, Vashatkaraha, all of those namas we were looking at. In Lalita Sahasranamam, it's a little different. You will see a lot of description of Devi in her Saguna form. And there are lots of amazing Bijaksharas, and I think there are crores of them that have not been deciphered even by the greatest of the sages. There are nicely encoded and embedded within Lalita Sahasranamam. So there is a powerful reason why you would chant Vishnu Sahasranamam. There is another powerful reason why you would chant Lalita Sahasranamam. I personally don't feel like they are mutually exclusive to each other. And there is a benefit, like a different kind of a benefit from chanting each of these. And in Lalita Sahasranamam is considered to be equivalent to Vedas because, as I mentioned, there is a whole tantric philosophy that is given in Lalita Sahasranamam. There are lots of Bijaksharas in it. There is again the Saguna Brahman, very easy for us to visualize and easy for us to be attached to the mother. But there is also a lot of Nirguna Brahman also comes into picture. And the whole, the Brahmanda Puranas, the Lalitopakhyanam story is also encoded, like not necessarily encoded, but very nicely weaved into it. So the Bandasuras fight, like, how Ashwarudha, all Sampatkari, all of these Shaktis have encountered and how what the battle was, all of that is given in Lalita Sahasranamam. Our goal is to try to understand this each namam from different perspectives, and we will only limit to what's been commented upon by Bhaskara Raya. There are a lot more deeper meanings that are not in it, and there are some meanings even within Saubhagya Bhaskaram that I am not allowed to speak out loud about. And when it is that case, then I will specifically mention it. And it is offered to Sri Vidya Upasakas and secretive knowledge. So even when we were chanting the Purvanyasam, I did very specifically mention that in Vishnu Sahasranamam we say Ashya Sri Vishnor Divya Sahasranama Stotra Mahamantrasya. In Lalita Sahasranamam, we actually call it a little differently. It's important to understand the tantric philosophy behind it, the importance of Sri Chakram. So I'll be mentioning those as well, wherever the names, the namas specifically require those things, and the positions of Devis in the Sri Chakram and things like that. So to how much ever I'm allowed to speak, I'll be speaking about those individual terms as well. The other thing, there are two ways of describing Saguna Brahman. One is called as Padadi Keshantam, and the other one is Keshadi Padantam. So essentially what it means is either you can describe Bhagavan, a Saguna Rupam, from the feet, and usually they start from the lines or the dhuli that is under the feet, or the sand, or the sand particles that are under the feet, and the lines under the feet, and till the hair. That's how they are described. So Shankaracharya has written one of those Padadi Keshanta Stotram for Sri Mahavishnu, and the other one is describing from hair till the toes, till the feet. So Lalita Sahasranamam takes the Keshadi Padantam kind of format. So we will be looking at those. So the first one is the most critical namam. The other minor thing I wanted to mention is because we are learning it with meaning and understanding, it's important to visualize and actually do it with the bhavana. So even if we didn't learn the full Lalita Sahasranamam, you don't have to wait until then to start chanting these slokas. If you have learned one namam, that namam is powerful enough for you to start getting benefits from it. And it's important to also note both Vishnu Sahasranamam and Lalita Sahasranamam provide us with both kinds of benefits. The bhukti and mukti are the two things. So bhukti is all the material benefits. So in the dharma, artha, kama, moksha, the first three are considered the bhukti. It's important for us to do our dharma as well, not just artha and kama. Artha basically means financial security, kama basically means anything that gives us happiness. But doing those two in a dharmic way is critically important for being Sanatana Dharmis. So the first three, dharma, artha, kama, are considered bhukti, what we need in a material world, and mukti is moksham, what we need as after. So with that context, if there are any questions, I'll take those. Any comments, if you know anything, please feel free to share. It doesn't have to be just me reading through the books and sharing the knowledge that I know. We're all knowledgeable. If you have any additional things that you want to share, please go ahead. And then we'll start chanting the first sloka.
Did you say Lalita Sahasranamam takes up the Keshadipada format?
Correct.
Okay, so it starts from the head down.
Correct. Correct.
Oh, okay, thank you.
So it actually, if you see the first, second line of the first sloka, it actually says Chidagni Kunda Sambhuta. She is born out of the Chid Agni, of the Agni Kundam, that we were just reading in the Lalitopakhyanam.
Yes.
And then we will start with, so it starts with Champaka Shoka Punnaga Saugandhika Lasatkacha. So Kuravindas are the hair. So flowers in her hair, and then the hair, that's where it starts, and it goes to her eyes, and it to her feet.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I see birds like Chillika and all that.
Yeah. So Vadana Smara Mangalya. So even all of those Nava Champaka Pushpaba, Nasa Dandam is the nose.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we'll chant the first sloka and try to chant it very correctly today. And then we will start reading the meanings from next week onwards. In Vishnu Sahasranamam, it's a little easier to understand each of the namas if you know a bit of Vedanta. So I'll be combining some Vedanta philosophy into Vishnu Sahasranamam namas. In Lalita Sahasranamam, I'll be trying to combine, to the degree I'm allowed to, any of the Sri Vidya Tantram and associating that with it, any mentionable Bijaksharas and things like that. It's also important to do a bit of a fine print here, I think, before I start the chant part. When we are describing a feminine deity, there are some aspects that we feel like, oh, we are talking about mother, and are we allowed to talk about these aspects? So there will be a description of her breasts, there will be description of her thighs and everything. It's important to focus on our attention and on the mother and the motherly aspect of the universe, remembering that this is a Nirguna Brahman that we are talking about. And it actually, again, depending on where your mind goes, it's important to bring back to that motherly aspect, because that's where I believe one of the temples that I know has the concept of, depending on where you center your location, there is a self-evaluation that checks Uttamadhikaris, other Madhyamadhikaris and Adhamadhikaris, depending on how much you're able to focus on the supreme and not on the physical aspect of the mother. So that's a fine print that is very necessary when we are talking about a feminine deity. We are almost close to 10:45. Do you guys have like 3 extra minutes so we can chant the first sloka, or do we want to do it next week?
I think we can start with one.
Okay. Om Shri Matre Namaha. Okay, who would like to chant with me?
I like to do. Oh, sorry. Okay. I like to do, but if you want to, you can do. Yeah.
Okay, Gomati ji. So we'll first look at how many namas are in each of these slokas. The first thing very important to note is where to break and where is a particular namam ending. And in Lalita Sahasranamam, we'll see longer namas in the first, I think 100 or 150. The namas are pretty long and it's important to chant them in the right order. So here we are seeing Sri Mata is one namam. Sri Maharagni is another namam. Srimat Simhasaneshwari is one namam. Chidagni Kunda Sambhuta is the fourth namam. Devakarya Samudyata is the fifth namam. So there are 5 namas in this sloka. So if you are making notes, just write down as 5 and just put commas beside each of those namas if they already, most of the stotras don't have it in their books. Please do commas because you're not allowed to break in between the namam when you're chanting. You have to chant the full namam at one go. So I cannot say Chidagni Kunda Sambhuta. That would be just completely changing the meaning of what's in there. So it's very, very critical that we chant the full nama in one stretch. So, Gomati ji, can we start? Whoever wanted to chant.
I can do it.
Okay. Shri Mata Shri Maharagni
Shri Mata Shri Maharagni
Shrimat Simhasaneshwari
Srimat Simhasneshwari
Chidagnikunda Sambhuta
Chidagnikunda Sambhuta
Devakarya Samudyata
Devakarya Samudyata
Shri Mata Shri Maharagni
Shri Mata Shri Maharagni
Shrimat Simhasaneshwari
Srimat Simhasneshwari
Chidagnikunda Sambhuta
Chidagnikunda Sambhuta
Devakarya Samudyata
Devakarya Samuddata
Samudyata
Samyudat
Samudyata
Samyudat
No, Samudyata.
Samudyata
Yeah. So Devakarya Samudyata.
Devakarya Samudyata.
Awesome. So for your meditation, even if you meditated on these 5 or even the first 3 or even the first just one, it's an amazing visualization and the whole philosophy is just hidden here. So we'll just briefly talk about a couple things before we conclude for the day. Sri Mata, she is the auspicious mother, and mother is the form of creation. So that is the creation aspect. Sri Maharagni, and that is the feminine version of Maharaja. Raja, Ragni, Raja and not Rani. Here we are saying Maharagni, which we will go into a little more detail on why it is called why she is not called Sri Maharani, but why is she called Sri Maharagni? There is a beautiful difference for that, which we will go into understanding next week. But Maharaja and Maharani and Maharagni are supposed to be maintaining the order and like the law and the welfare of their subjects. So she is also the first one we were looking at is the Srishtikarta. Now she is the Sthitikarini. She is also the reason for Sthiti, maintenance of the universe. Srimat Simhasana Ishwari. Srimat Simhasaneshwari. There are multiple meanings Bhaskara Rayaji gives in the Saubhagya Bhaskaram for this. And this is the dissolution part of the universe. So Srishti, Sthiti and Samharam are given within the first 3 namas. Then they are saying Chidagni Kunda Sambhuta. There is a very whole scientific philosophy behind this. The simple term is Chit Agni. Chit is the consciousness. Agni, we know, Kunda is basically Agni Kundam is like a homam, where we do the homam. Kunda basically means a pit. So Sambhuta, somebody who is manifested herself, or somebody who has emerged from. So we are saying Chidagni Kunda Sambhuta. She's emerged from this fire of Chit, fire pit of Chit. And we'll understand Chit a little bit more next week. Deva Karya Samudyata. She is now getting ready to perform the Deva Karyam. So we read through what is Lalita in Lalita Upakhyanam. That is the reason why I was reading that first. There is a reason Devas wanted her wanted her emergence or manifestation, and here she is now starting to get to that work. So Deva Karya Samudyata. Hope that's helpful. So we'll conclude it here with a short prayer, and we'll catch up next week to understand the meanings. I will send the proper recording, both video, audio files, and Google Doc file for the Anganyasa, Karanyasa, and the Panchopacharams. I don't like what we have done in the class, so I'll exclude that part from the recording, and I'll maintain the recording for the Lalitopakhyanam and to the first sloka that we have done. And next week, we'll start chanting and understanding the meanings a little more in detail. Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinah, Sarve Santu Niramayah, Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu, Ma Kaschid Dukkha Bhag Bhavet. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Sri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om. Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. Sarvam Sri Paradevatarpanamastu. Sanatana Dharmaha Sada Pravarde Vedanadah Sarvatra Pragadje Bhagavannama Sankirtanam Sarvan Parirakshe Soham. Thank you so much for joining. We'll catch up next week.
Thank you. Dhanyavadaha.
And we are much obliged. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.